FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You're listening to the Financial Survival Network. The date is June 1, 2015. That means 5 months of the year are already gone. The Masters in Washington, in London, in Beijing, in Tokyo, they've managed to keep this house of cards from collapsing. A lot of duct tapes being used, a lot of chewing gum, a lot of paper clips, and hey, I think the structure is becoming so unwieldy that pretty soon all the King's men won't be able to keep it from going off the deep end, over the cliff, whatever. But here to talk about it, John Rubino, dollarcollapse.com. That's where I start my reading every day. You should too. And make sure you pick up John's book, The Money Bubble, that he co-wrote with James Turk, who we've got to get on the show here one of these days soon. I'll make sure Melissa contacts him shortly. I think he's enjoying his life. John, where is he living now? Over in Mallorca or someplace in the Channel Islands? Where is
Hey, Kerry. Yeah, James lives in London now.
Oh, he's in London?
And he's technically retired, but he's one of those guys who in retirement is busier than he was during his career, because he's still involved with Gold Money, which was just bought out by BitGold.
Get out of here.
Which is an electronic payment system that looks like it's got a decent chance of developing a gold-based Bitcoin transaction system that might be this hybrid that we've been talking about for such a long time, where your money is saved and protected in gold, but your transactions take place in Bitcoin, which bypasses the traditional banking system and is frictionless and cost-free, and so it's a really interesting payment system that they're building. And James is intimately involved in that, so I think he's going to be busy for the foreseeable future.
So I guess retirement did not agree with him, huh?
I don't think he ever had any intention of actually retiring. He left day-to-day operations at Gold Money, but then he immediately started building other projects, and I think, he's one of those guys who will do that forever. We'll find him at the age of 95 running something or other somewhere and doing interesting stuff.
All right. So note to Melissa, get James Turk on. We got to talk about this gold bit, because that is exciting. And there was somebody out there, Anthem Blanchard, who was James Blanchard's son, who was trying to come up with Bitcoin type backed by gold, but it was kind of in the exploratory phases when I saw him last year at Freedom Fest. Freedom Fest is coming up. I have booked my tickets. It goes from, I think, July 8th through the 11th. I'm going to hook up with Robert Ian when I'm out there. And if you have a chance to come out, you should check it out. It really is a lot of fun, and I highly recommend it, because one day we're all going to be libertarians, whether you like it or not. I think it's heading to that point, isn't it, John?
Hopefully it is. But where is Freedom Fest this time, Kerry? Is this in Vegas?
Oh, yeah, it's always in Vegas.
Always in Vegas. Okay.
They've been doing it for the past 2 years at Planet Hollywood, which really kind of works out well. Just the setup of the place, it really does. It's a great venue for it. And I think it really does work out there, because it's kind of like the exhibition floor is kind of round. So you wind up walking in circles till you get dizzy and fall down. But last year I had the pleasure of interviewing PJ O'Rourke, who I think he's one of the funniest guys around. I think he's probably the best political satirist since H.L. Mencken. He just nails what's wrong with government better than anybody else out there, and he does it with humor, which is completely disarming. And the crazy left, as well as the insane right, have never really figured out how to deal with disarming humor, satire, and parody. And he's just it was nothing what I really expected him to be like. I don't know what I expected him to be like. I expected him to be like a physically imposing, intense kind of person. And he's just this gentle soul who has a really wicked pen. You know what I mean? You know who I thought was like a budding PJ O'Rourke is Aaron Clary, but he's a bit more vicious with the pen than PJ is, but nonetheless, Aaron is one of the funniest guys out there as well, and I recommend his work, like Bachelor Pad Economics, and he's got one, I can't remember the exact name, called Freeing the Black Man or Empowering the Black Man from Economic Slavery, something like that. Really good book.
Well, Kerry, you're right. Every political movement needs good satirists. And the right has Rush Limbaugh and a few others, and the left has Jon Stewart and a few others. So the libertarians do need some guys like that. So it's good that PJ O'Rourke and Aaron Clary are out there. And here's hoping they get a lot more media exposure in the future.
Yeah, and one of the great things about PJ O'Rourke is he doesn't just talk about politics. He talks about cars. He talks about things in everyday life. Some of the funniest work I've ever read by him is things that he's done from Car and Driver magazine, Automotive magazine, Automobile magazine. I mean, just hysterical stuff having nothing to do with politics, which is the sign of a great writer, that you can write about anything, not just your chosen topic. So getting off topic a little bit, but what's going on now in the world is probably, if you can't laugh about it, you might as well just go dig a hole and get your bunker ready.
Yeah. Well, lots of interesting numbers coming out. In just the last week, we in the U.S. revised first quarter GDP down to negative 0.7%, which means the economy was contracting in the first quarter. And the numbers that have come out since then don't make the second quarter look a whole lot better. Manufacturing is up a little bit, and housing had a little rebound to offset a little bit of a plunge before that. And just this morning, consumer spending was actually down slightly in the U.S., which is probably the biggest number of all, because that's 70% of the economy. So if consumers are spending less, the economy can't grow. And so we are now on track in the U.S. for basically zero growth for the first half of the year, with nothing really on the horizon to speed things up in the second half. So we're close to technical recession. And at the same time, we've got the Fed threatening to raise interest rates, and a general sense out there based on stocks going up and bond prices also going up mostly, that we're in some kind of a recovery, and that there's growth, and there's not really. And that's completely unacceptable in an over-indebted society, because you have to grow your economy at a rate that exceeds the amount of new debt that you're accumulating, or the debt load in relation to the size of the economy gets bigger and bigger. And that's what we're doing right now. We already have unsustainable debts, but we're adding to our debts at a rate that is increasing the debt relative to the size of the economy. So we're digging ourselves into a deeper and deeper hole if we don't grow. And that's our situation right now. All the policymakers in Washington are looking at basically flat growth, around zero, and debt growth at a somewhat higher rate. And they see these trend lines diverging now and aren't really sure what to do, because they really want to scale back QE and raise interest rates, because they're afraid that continued extremely low interest rates are destabilizing. But at the same time, that's never been done with the economy dropping towards recession or flatlining as it is right now. And so they're afraid of destabilization in the other direction, rising interest rates causing asset prices to crack, and then the wealth effect shifting into reverse, where our stocks go down, so we feel poorer, so we spend even less, and the economy enters some kind of a downward spiral that they don't have any ammo left to get out of, because they can't lower interest rates too far below zero without having to make cash illegal somehow. So you get into some really crazy times if it goes the way it could go.
Well, here's a couple of great things from Zero Hedge. Zero Hedge, irreverence, satire, all the great things we're talking about. And it said here, one of these two numbers was not seasonally adjusted enough. And it was the ISM and the purchasing power.
I think it's the Chicago PMI,
yeah,
I think, right?
Yeah, the PMI. Yeah. And the Chicago PMI is in the crapper, but the ISM was nice and high at 52.8. Anything over 50, the economy is expanding. But John, here's a number that I think is really, really important. Aside from the fact that gold spiked back over 1,200 and silver over 17, which is an interesting phenomena that's been going on for a few months now, actually since the beginning of the year, if I'm not mistaken. Every time gold gets slammed under 1,200 and silver gets slammed under 17. And of course, there's no manipulation because we don't believe in such things because, look, we have free markets, honest markets that governments just would never dream of trying to manipulate, right? But every time it happens, within 3 days to a week, it comes roaring back over 1,200 and over 17. But there's no manipulation. We know that, right? So, but here's a headline from Zero Hedge. And like I said, I don't take all this Zero Hedge stuff at face value, but hey, it's a good place to start to get some of the news. And income's up 0.4%, which is better than the 0.3% was expected. I guess all that $15 an hour for working in McDonald's is starting to kick in Walmart. But what happened? Savings went up. God forbid savings should go up, and it's not going into the economy. And look, Obamacare goes up, which does nothing to build wealth in the economy. The savings in gas is not going for any spending because all your insurance goes up, your healthcare insurance, your tuition for the kiddies goes up, everything else that you have to spend money on, your auto insurance, just got my bill, it's up. All those things that you have to have are going up. So, of course, the economy is really not getting better. And that's the point here is disposable income. I mean, I'm kind of saying what you were saying, just in a different way, is going, sideways here.
Yeah, and I think the whole seasonal adjustment thing is an interesting topic as well, because so many numbers before they're seasonally adjusted look worse than after seasonal adjustment. And it seems to be really skewed towards improving the presentation of numbers rather than actually smoothing out seasonal variations. And because the first quarter GDP number was so weak, you've got a lot of calls from economists now saying, well, okay, we've seasonally adjusted this number, but we didn't do it enough. We've got to increase the seasonal adjustment to make the first quarter GDP numbers look better. And this is the kind of thing that most people obviously don't get because it's really inside baseball. But it's a huge advantage for government to be able to massage these numbers to make them look better before they release them. So you don't see the raw numbers, you only see the seasonally adjusted number, and they tend to be way better than the raw numbers. So Zero Hedge was pointing that out, that one data series was not seasonally adjusted. That was, I think, the Chicago PMI, and it was tanking. It was showing extreme weakness, while most other data series are seasonally adjusted, and they look pretty good, or at least not horrible. And why is that? It's because the government gets to massage the seasonally adjusted numbers. And so the conclusion is that the economy is actually worse than it seems based on these headline numbers. And that's been going on for a long time. I mean, I think you can look at almost any data series that the U.S. government releases, and the adjusted numbers look a lot better than the raw numbers. And this goes on for, years. So there's not, one quarter offsets another quarter and you get a wash. It doesn't seem to be that way. It seems like it's a long-term trend for the raw numbers to be weakening while the seasonally adjusted numbers and other kinds of massage numbers like they do with inflation tend to look a little better than you would think. So yeah, one more way that they're manipulating the data to their own ends and getting away with it so far.
Well, of course, who's going to stop them? Hey, getting back to war on cash and all that, once there's no cash in the system, you can't have a bank run. Right now in Greece, they're having a bank run. There's an article again in Zero Hedge, and we're not pushing Zero Hedge. Unfortunately, they don't pay us any money. I don't know if they make money or not. they make money. I mean, they got a bunch of Google ads here. So then they got those stupid ads on the bottom with scantily clad women that make you want to click, 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 click until you wind up back in someplace and never land in the web, and you don't know how you got there. But they took out like 800 million in cash in euros. So they're going to shut those banks down or limit withdrawals for sure. Yeah, 800 million euros withdrawn from checking accounts. So if you don't have cash, if there's no such thing as cash, meaning currency, paper money, and you want to go have a bank run, how are you going to withdraw your cash? It means you get like a bank check for the money, and then you go deposit it in another bank, or you get a debit card, and then what do you do with that? You're screwed. You can't have a bank run with no cash, John.
Yeah, it makes bank runs harder to pull off because people can't just show up and take their cash out. Yeah. However, they can use their plastic or checks or their iPhone to buy real stuff. You can still get out of your currency if you do it electronically.
It's not a bank run, John. Is you can't have people lined up around. Look at those pictures. Type in Google bank run, New York, Great Depression, and you see what a real bank run is. This is a silent bank run.
It's not a physical thing, but it can still be a cyber bank run where everybody just decides to buy real estate or precious metals or whatever, where they just take their cash that's sitting in a bank, earning negative 2 or 3%, and they shift it into gold bars in a Swiss vault that only costs 1% to store per year.
Right.
And so you can still have financial destabilization when people lose faith in currency, but it's not visual, as you said. We won't have people lined up outside the bank. It'll be websites being overwhelmed by traffic at a given bank's online banking system when people try to take too much of their money out, and that's not visual. It's not something you can put on the news very easily and scare people with. So it's still better for governments to have it work that way than to have actual people standing in lines outside of banks.
That's a currency rule.
And it's really important to understand that that's something that's coming in some form if the world's economies don't grow from here, because normally, when an economy flatlines, when it stops growing, the response from governments and central banks is to lower interest rates. But we've already lowered interest rates to zero and in some cases negative levels. So they don't have any more ammo other than to go seriously negative. And to go seriously negative, they have to get rid of cash. So this is a not idle speculation. This is the next stage in global monetary policy if the economic numbers aren't strongly positive from here on out, and there's nothing anywhere that implies that they will be. So the next year should be really interesting from a theoretical standpoint. We're going to figure out how low interest rates can go before cash withdrawals become debilitating, and then what governments will try to do and what they can do in response to that, as far as limiting the use of cash around the world and maybe even making it illegal. So we're getting into some serious economic fascism here, and so from a safe distance, it's interesting. If you're deeply involved in it and threatened by it, it's a very scary time.
And we're all threatened by it because cash was created. Got to look at the reasons cash was created in the first place. Currency was created, and the functions of it, right? As a medium of exchange, store of value, portability, divisibility, all that stuff. And now they're taking away those functions, and it's act of freedom to have cash in your pocket.
Well, yeah, I mean, cash, of course, was invented and evolved before electronic transactions were technologically possible. And so now that most of us do most of our transacting electronically, we do most of our buying and selling with credit cards or with a PayPal account or something similar. And so we don't use cash very much. And so you could make the case that cash is an anachronism that does more harm than good. I mean, that's the case that a lot of economists are starting to make now. But the real function of cash now is as the last bastion of private transactions that can't be traced by the government and by the big banks. So now it serves the purpose of preserving individual freedom. And so calls for getting rid of cash have a political component as well as a financial component. You can make the purely financial case that cash just increases friction in the system, makes it less efficient because 99% of what we do anyhow is electronic. So why do we bother with these dirty pieces of paper that have to be created and carried around and everything? But the real story here is political, because when cash is eliminated, so is that last potential bastion of freedom of transaction, or freedom of transaction unobserved by the government.
Yeah.
And so they're making a political statement, but they're couching it in financial terms when they try to get rid of cash. And we need to be aware of that, and to be aware of the damage that would be done if all of our transactions are forced onto the internet, where they can be watched by the government. So then they know where we are, they know what we're doing, they can turn our cell phones on, turn it into microphones, listen to what we're doing, follow us by GPS so we know. And it's a really big brother-ish kind of system that is
exactly
in that way created. And there's nothing we can do about it once cash is gone, because we have no other way of transacting privately.
You got it.
Unless these services like Bitcoin and BitGold and things like that spread and are allowed to spread by the world's governments and give us an outlet. We'll see how that works, because it's not clear that these things can survive if governments decide to interfere with them. No, we're going to find that out soon too.
They really will have difficulty, but the mind of man is such, John, that you will come up with alternatives, because it's just the way it works. We know this.
Well, there have always been black markets. Governments have never been able to make transactions where there is supply and demand, but outside of the law. They're never been able to make those things completely illegal. So what you do when you make those kinds of things illegal, you end up with gray markets and black markets, where the stuff still gets bought and sold. It's just outside of the tax system, outside of the legal system. And so no doubt something like that will spring up to replace the transactions that now take place with cash. It'll be a lot more inefficient, and it'll turn regular people into criminals. So, we'll see if it's something like prohibition, where you created an entire new criminal class by making alcohol illegal.
Yeah.
So if you try to make cash illegal, will the same thing happen? Will there be cash cartels,
of course,
out there where transactions are taking place in black market currencies?
Let me tell you exactly what's going to happen. You will wind up paying more than the face value of cash to buy it, because there are certain transactions you aren't going to want people to know about, and counterfeiting will be rampant, and you will pay. Initially, you'll pay like 101 cents on the dollar for a $100 bill. You'll be paying $101. But later on, it'll go up to 125 till this madness ends. Excuse me, if it ever does. This is the way these black markets work. And that's what you can look forward to. So get ready. It's going to happen.
Yeah, it sounds like attempts are going to be made along those lines, because there are various governments that are actively trying to make cash, if not illegal, so inconvenient and so expensive to use that people just voluntarily stop using it. So we'll see. But this is Kerry, this is a unique time. We've been saying this ever since you and I started doing these shows. It's an undercurrent of our talks has been how unusual these times are and how unique they are historically. And it's only becoming more so as governments get more and more desperate and start doing crazier and crazier things. The latest one is trying to ban cash. And there are other things after that are even scarier. But right now, this year, the war on cash is the big story.
And it's a big one. I was ahead of it. You were ahead of it by a year. And I was ahead of the bank runs. The concept of a bank run in America is obsolete, especially because most of the deposits are held. It's not like you and me. We have $100 or $10,000 on deposit at Too Big to Fail National Bank. We're not the ones. It's GM that's got $16 billion on deposit with Too Big to Fail. They get a bank check, or they wire it to Too Big to Fail Junior, They have no choices where they're going to put their money. They're going to wire it to the Bank of China, which is also insolvent. You got one insolvent bank to the next, to the next, to the next. There are no choices, which is why the concept of a bank run is just unfathomable at this date and time. Anyway, John, so much for today. Find John's work, dollarcollapse.com. You'll always find the link on our site, financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Make sure you sign up for that mailing list because you're going to want to get the links from our latest webinar where we had John Embry and Rick Rule over at at the Sprott organization, talking about the war on cash, what's coming with the resource sector. It's amazing, John. Rick Rule is saying he's lived through 4 resource busts. 3 of them, after they ended, he made 10 times on his money. He didn't have as much money then as he has now. He's expecting to make even more now because this is the worst resource bust that he's ever lived through. So just something to think about. Financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Go to John's site, dollarcollapse.com. John, we will see you next week.
Great, Kerry. See you then.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.